Welcome to the Spirit-Centered Business Podcast, where we blend the spiritual with the practical for supernatural results. Now, here is your host, Bralynn Newby.
Welcome to Spirit-Centered Business. Hey there, I am back with Jeff Rohr. If you missed session 1, you will absolutely want to go to spiritcenteredbusiness.com, click that little podcast button and get it, because we were talking about identity. And in fact, after we stopped the segment, Jeff had another little brilliant piece on identity that I want to just touch on because it's so good before we get into the covenant piece, which I promise we will get there, no matter how many bunny trails we take, because Holy Spirit will bring us back. All right, Jeff. So what you were talking about was court cases, and especially when we go off the rails and we don't even recognize, like when we're getting irritable or snippy or jealous, or how do we deal with that? And what is, just tell me what you just told me after, off camera.
Yeah. So the context was I was talking about engaging with people that were in the court cases, that were doing a lot of court cases. And I was saying how intimacy has to be first understood before you can do court cases. And then I went on a little trail of, it's like myself. I was known to do a lot of court cases, but it started with me. We're talking about identity in the last segment. When I started drawing close to the Father and having those intimate encounters and listening to him, he started revealing things on my soul that were ugly. And so I'm trying to get that junk out, right? So then I'm going into court. The Father literally showed me how to do court case on myself. And so I'm doing this dictation from the Lord saying, say this. But see, that was birthed out of me spending days and days of just in the morning at 7:30 trying to hear his voice on what I'm supposed to do on business. And then he's showing me things about my soul, things like we were talking about. You just get irritated when someone walks in the room, like, what is that? Or I react to someone and I'm just angry. Or I hear a statement, I'm like, I just snap. My thing was I would get angry real quick. And it's because all these identity pressures of not fulfilling who I really am and living with that yucky image of that versus the image that we talked about in the last segment that lives inside you, that's birthed from the Father. Well, I would go in and say, Father, judge me to life. And I would say, I don't want that junk in me anymore. That thing that you're shining your light on my soul on when I'm getting closer to you and being vulnerable and being yielded and being humble, and say, Lord, reteach me. I don't know everything. Help me understand that. He says, well, first, son, I want that. Give me that. And it was a process of yielding. But first to say, going through these court cases and saying, Lord, judge me to life. Judge my negative thoughts about these kind of people. Judge the root of why I have that negative image. Why do I have that negative image? Maybe I have that negative image because I see the success in their life that I don't have. What is that? That's tied to my identity of insecurity of what? That I'm not performing. Of what? That I'm being judged because I don't provide as well as whatever. And it's compiles, right? So you ferret all the way down to the root cause. And the Father was saying, this is the real issue, son. I want that issue. Let me have it. And so then I'm able to open up even more in my capacity in business because that's no longer an issue. I can walk with confidence. I can walk with surety. Again, tying back to my identity in the Father, not in my inconsistencies or my fears or my inabilities. Giving those things to him. Yeah.
I totally hear you. And people don't realize that often, I would say, 100% of the time, okay, 99.9. If something is going wrong in your business, there's typically something going wrong in you.
Sure.
And so we need to be surrendered and submitted so that God can deal with that stuff. And often that process of dealing with it is doing court cases and court stuff so that your business can heal once you heal. Yeah.
The access points the enemy has into your life, or the access points he has into the business, which is your covenant that you have with the Father, because you create a contract there. But if I have myself judged and I'm clean and I'm clear and I have a clear conscience, and every morning, here's what had happened. I'd have my time with the Lord. I'd seek him. I'd hear from him. And before I was getting into my day of him saying, do this, do this, do this, he would say, I want this out of you. I want that out of you. Now I'm clean, right? So the top issue that the Father wants is this heart issue. And so I give it to him. Now I can go and direct myself at the enemy and say, Father, now where's the enemy got inroads? Because now we dealt with this. You don't have access no more. Your law says that's true. So let's go deal with that. And the Father say, I'll deal with it. Because you've yielded that, I'll deal with it. The battle's mine. Let me go fight that battle. But give it to me in the sense of a court case. And then wait and watch for the fruit. Don't go meddle with that stuff. Wait. Watch for fruit. Fruit is a spiritual principle. It says that we should measure men, or we should judge men by their fruit. So it's true in business. It's true in your personal life. It's true in relationships. Watch for the fruit. If you believe you're hearing from God and you're acting on it, thus saith the Lord, or something that you've engaged with God for your identity, and you've had yourself judged, and you feel like that judgment is finished, then wait for it to manifest. That's faith. God says that he doesn't, the thing that pleases him in Hebrews, he says, is faith. Faith pleases God, right? So we have to operate that way. That's how we apply our charismatic piece of who we are. You know, our faith is in waiting on that judgment to manifest and not meddling with it. Because if I feel like I'm healed and freed because I'm judged, then I'm free. I need to go out and act on that in faith. And I'll tell you this, I spent time judging myself for several weeks. I know people have gone through this process. For several weeks, I just, whatever come up, I just say, Father, have it. I don't want it. I'm a dead man walking, you know. And there was one thing that particularly irritated me. We had a house guest and we were keeping this missionary, and she'd come up in the morning and do nothing, and we were housing her, and it just would irritate me. I'd come out and there'd be dishes in the sink. I was thinking, you know what, you're living for free. Why don't you just do the dishes? This irritation. Well, I had spent a whole weekend with the Lord judging all this stuff like every day from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I come out of the room on Sunday night and I saw this pile of dishes in there, and I was no longer offended. It was so shocking to me because I normally reacted internally in such a vexing way, like, ooh, cannot believe you're taking advantage of my grace. Why would you, these things.
Yeah.
I'd gotten that junk out, or he had rather. I'd let it go. I yielded it, and he took it and judged it in me, and it was no longer there. I was shocked at how I was reacting. I saw her with heavy grace instead of heavy judgment, which is also the nature and character of the Father.
Wow, that's really good, and a really good example. Very good. Okay, we needed to get that out. Somebody needed to hear that. So whoever that was, and probably me.
I need to rehear it.
Okay, all right. Oh, well, we just kind of casual. We just go with the flow here on Inner Business. So now we're going to get into the meat of what this segment is all about, and the covenants. So I'm going to just give you the floor, because I know that there's lots of different ways you could go down this trail, but I know that Holy Spirit has something brilliant to say through you.
Well, we named our company Covenant Management Services. And in the past, I'd had some catchy names. We had Trim and Toss. We had HMW, which was Heartland Management Wichita. We've had, there was another dry cleaning company that we had. We called it, I can't remember what we called it. It was some catchy name. But none of them were really kingdom names, And so I'm in the season of understanding covenant. So I am not a scholar in this. I'm a student. And so I'm teaching from a student perspective. I want everybody to understand that. So I don't feel like I have a full revelation of it, but I do have enough to operate on it. And it's been seeped out through the identity pieces over the years of going to court, judging myself, and having myself cleansed, and understanding my strengths and weaknesses in the kingdom, and really my calling and purpose in the world. And the maturity of that relationship with Father is him saying, you're in covenant with me, and I'm in covenant with you. And that's really the premise for all of creation. I was listening to another minister, and I cannot remember his last name, but he was talking about covenants as well. And he has a theology and a doctorate and all this in it. He's talking about there's several different types of covenant, because the particular covenant that he emphasized was one where when we're in covenant with the Father, it's like two kings being in covenant with each other, right? But there's always a greater king that is blessing the lesser king with no strings attached. And I can't remember the name of that covenant, and later I'll come back with notes, but this is kind of, we're winging it a little bit here. But that covenant is the type of covenant we have with the Father. And what he keeps affirming in me every day as I'm operating on this revelation of covenant with him is that he is the one that's sustaining the covenant. The covenant is with himself. It's like he said, I could swear against on no one else, so I swear on myself. The Father's not going to break covenant with you. He's not going to break covenant with me. And this is the other thing the Father said. If you violate the covenant is not broken because I'm the one sustaining the covenant. Same thing as Revelations 3. The invitation is still there. Just because you don't open the door doesn't mean there's no invitation. And the same is true in the kingdom with covenants. And so covenant, what I've understood, and we're talking about business, the Father's revealed to me that covenant is when we establish a corporation, an entity, a partnership, a city, when we create and draft documents and we agree to laws and bylaws and things, this is covenant, okay? It's an agreement, right? And the one we have with the Father is there's no requirement for us to fulfill something to garner the blessing of that covenant. We are his children. We are his creation. And therefore we have access because of that, period. We're kings, we're sons, we're priests, we're all those hats, right? And that covenant is constant. And so if I understand that I can tap into a limitless covenant with a king, if you will, in a kingdom that has unlimited capacity and power and strength and resources. I don't use the word money anymore. I use the word resources because that's what the Father's referred to me is we need resources to facilitate what we're supposed to do to honor our piece in that covenant. So if we're trying to honor covenant, if we're in covenant with him, if we say, you are the king that I'm in covenant with, it's kind of like people used to, I know the statement, Jesus is our CEO, or there was a book out like that.
Yeah.
Or Jesus was the other person that sat in a chair next to you. This is kind of that idea, but here God is sustaining the covenant regardless of what you do. You just have to line up with it. And that comes from a place of understanding who you are, from your identity in him. Now, if I think I'm his son, if I really believe that, if I really believe I'm a king in the kingdom, then I should operate from those principles. And the principles of the kingdom are covenant, right? They can't be broken because I am not perfect, because he's the one sustaining it. So what do I have to do?
So you both entered into this covenant knowing that you wouldn't be able to sustain it, right? That there will be times when you'll fall down on the job. But that doesn't mean that the covenant is broken because he's the one sustaining both sides.
Yes.
Am I hearing it right? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I was listening to this guy who has a PhD and all this, and it was following suit with all the revelations that the Father was releasing. And I'm flabbergasted because I don't usually get all my revelations from a scriptural context. I get the revelation, then it gets confirmed through scriptural context. And so that's what always has happened to me. Mine comes from relationship, then gets confirmed through reality. And that's how he operates with me. But he always confirms it through a scriptural context. And he says, if you want to take a look at covenant, look at Abraham. And Abraham's covenants were tied to land. Well, we just recently purchased land in Texas. And right after we purchased that land, the Lord wanted us to engage in covenant with him. And we had a contract for the land, and the owners that had this made it extremely difficult for us to close on the land. And so much so that me and my wife went back to the Lord 3 times over the period of 3 months before we closed on it to ask him if this really was his will, because it got so difficult with these people. And the Father kept saying to us over and over and over again, every time we'd go in and engage them together as a couple, the Lord would say, honor your covenant. But all we had was a contract. We never called it covenant. We didn't have a company named Covenant Management or any of that. And he kept saying, honor your covenant. And so when we got through, when we purchased it and they were off the land, it was like this huge thing lifted. And the Father says that because you had honored your covenant, I'm engaging with covenant with you. And there was this idea of us understanding what covenant looked like from the perspective of the greater king. You know, there was a lot of reasons we could have broke our contract. Plenty of reasons we could have broke it. But the obedience to the Father to say, I want this. And here, there's an inheritance that's tied to my covenant.
Mm.
So the covenant engages my inheritance. And so far, that's about as far as I've gotten with this. And I'm walking on this revelation day in and day out. So this is the hot off the press stuff that's happened in the last 2 years here, but especially really intense the last 12 months because we acquisitioned it and now we're living in it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's an inheritance with the land. It's tied to the land. And so if you look at Abraham, his covenant with God is tied to a particular location. And there's a release of inheritance to his life, which is, if you want to call it something, supply to facilitate what he's supposed to do in the earth. So Abraham goes to a place called there. He doesn't even identify it. But he gets to a certain location and he engages in covenant because God says, hey, I'm going to bless you, the land that you see all the way around you and your heirs and, you know, the sand of the sea and all this stuff, right? And he established his covenant right there. He builds an altar. He makes a physical representation, a symbol to acknowledge that to himself and to all creation that I have covenant with the Father in this area. And so I believe very firmly that covenants are tied to land. I think they're also tied to water, but there's a geographical issue that comes in with covenants too. And we feel drawn to Texas. All my family's in other places other than Texas. And so we had to leave our family to come to Texas. And we knew we were supposed to be here, but here we are. We're thriving during COVID because of covenant. We're not chasing work. We've had work brought to us because of covenant. The purpose and intent of my identity in the kingdom and my purpose in the kingdom is tied to that covenant. My inheritance, the release of wealth for my generation and 10 generations beyond me is tied to covenant, and that releases my inheritance. So far, those are pieces that we're operating off of. And right now, we launched our company, let's put it here, with the largest contract I've ever secured personally in all of my life. That's how the company was launched. And we're 10 months into this, and we're looking at bidding $1 million project right now. And we're talking to multiple different people about doing other ventures. But here's our focus. Can I engage in covenant with this person? Does this person understand kingdom? My old partners that I used to have over the years were scoundrels. My new people that I'm potentially looking at partner with are kingdom minded. And that kingdom word gets thrown around a lot in a lot of groups now. And what I mean by that is the context of what we're talking about. My relationship with the Father is first, doing what's right, my intended purpose in the kingdom, and that partner's intended purpose in the kingdom. Really, that's our focus, is obeying the Father in that. How am I facilitating the manifestation of the kingdom through operating with this person? And so now if I got the perspective of covenant, then I'm engaging in covenant with this person. That's a pretty serious deal. It's no longer just a contract or an opportunity. Really, I'm saying I'd be willing to be with you for the rest of my life kind of covenant. Not that you can't have temporary agreements or anything like that. What I'm saying is the sincerity and the intensity of it is like a marriage contract. Right?
Yeah. Okay, so, oh my gosh, I am thinking about going down a theoretical road right here in front of God and everybody on the show with you. Are you up for that? Okay, so in my industry, a lot of us are infopreneurs. The territory that we take for the kingdom is in the airwaves, across the internet. You know, we have websites and portals of that nature, right? That's how the money flows in and how we fund the work that God needs for us to do in the kingdom. Mm-hmm. Can these contracts be tied to some, I don't know, dimensional land, quote unquote, across in the ether, so that it comes up with that Abrahamic blessing?
So industry is where that lands. It comes under authority, mountains, and thrones is what I've seen that. And your contracts are your covenants. So you have dominion over a industry. You have a position in that industry. And we were talking about earlier about idolatry, where men take their positions in a particular industry. I'll give you an example. I had a dry cleaning company for a few years. And I went in the spirit one time. I was out handing out flyers door to door to a neighborhood we wanted to go pick up their laundry for them. And I'm looking in the spirit, and this guy that owns like the majority of the dry cleaners in this whole region, was the big guy, was sitting on a throne, and he was like grayed out and just looked like a zombie and not moving. And his throne was at a certain height over the top of this industrial mountain, this dry cleaning mountain. And dry cleaning, mountains are spheres of influence, right? They're areas that we have dominion in. Mm-hmm. And so I saw him in that position, but he didn't know what he had. He had used in his position to gain that position of authority. He can move things in that industry that make everybody else move, because he has that power and that authority. And so when you're talking about airwaves and all these things, I think that very well could be another area like land and water that can have covenants in it. And I also know that you can have dominion over industry. There was another guy I knew, a friend of mine, who did day trading. And I told him, we engaged one time, and I said, listen, and he was seeking some advice, because he said, Jeff, I just feel like I'm missing it. Like I don't have my mojo, And I said, well, here's the thing. As we engaged, I said, here's what I'm seeing. There's an end to the market. I saw these electrical lines flowing into this abyss, and there are little lights flying in and zigzagging all over. And I said, it's like I see you, it's like veins. And I said, I see you getting in like an on-ramp into this one vein, and you get off. But I said, here's what happens during the day. Before you go into the market, what I want you to do is take your position in the kingdom, sit in that proverbial throne that you have of authority, your identity, and ask God for the mandate for the day. What is it that I'm supposed to do today in this area where I have covenant with you, right? How do I engage in that? And when do I get in and when do I get out? And I said, you need to really have confidence in how you hear or see or sense or whatever. But I said, you need to pay attention to those cues. And I said, then get in there and do your skill set. What you do best is you analyze the heck out of it. That's your strength. So I said, all you're missing is the link in and the link out. And I go, you've seen it and tasted it before. I said, but here's the piece of his nature that was causing it. We tracked why he was having timidity in getting in. He wasn't scared. He just felt all of a sudden like, I don't know if I can do this. We tracked it all the way back to his childhood. As a boy, he felt insecure about some things with his father, that then whenever he was getting ready to make a big decision to move into the market, when he knew, he would back off. Or he'd get out too early because he's like, oh, it's going to go too far. I got to go. And it was tied back to his childhood. And so we started dealing with that. And he was getting this revelation of how a new method of doing his day trading. And for like 3 or 4 weeks, he was creating some new methods out of it. So, that kind of, but he had a position of authority in the market. I believe that he may or may not have been aware of his covenant with the Father in that. But once we understand what that is, that we have that authority because God is the one blessing us in that covenant. He's the one providing for us in that covenant. We need a strategy like Jacob and Laban. Jacob got a strategy to strip willow branches, put them in the water when the goats fed, because Laban said, you can have the striped and the spotted goats, but all the solid ones I want. Well, his herd doubled or tripled his. I can't remember what it was, but it's because of a strategy that the Father gave. But he wouldn't have had that strategy if he had never listened, if he wasn't in covenant, working that covenant daily. He wouldn't have known. So he's just willy-nilly, herding goats. But because of a strategy, Gideon was another one. Hey, take all the torches and carry them around. It looked like your 1,000,000-man army. Those are strategies that we want from the Father, but it's by, again, understanding identity and engaging in that covenant that says, you know what, I'm with a king who can bless my socks off. He's the one that sustains this. I'm not the superior king, again, yielding in humility. I'm the underling king that gets the blessing regardless.
So good. So good. So land can be figurative, and the covenant.
At this point, I would believe it could be. I have always attributed to industry, but I really believe there is a possibility that could be an actual geographical cyber location.
Yeah, and I feel like it too. I mean, we call it real estate.
It's an address.
Even on a web page, we talk about the real estate that different parts of our website takes up. So we use the language.
You have the air too, the atmosphere, there's different layers.
Yes. Yeah. We use that language. And so I feel like it's a thing.
I do too. Yeah. Most of what I've seen on covenants, the Lord has shown me that, cities have covenants. They've established themselves in a particular area and they have a covenant there. And so they call them townships, Mm-hmm. So I think you're right. I have never explored that with the Lord, but it's fascinating.
It really is. And since I'm, that's my area of expertise, I think that's probably the next thing I'm going to talk to him about. Let's make sure that I understand that correctly, because I do help people, to be able to activate and see what Father has for them and all of that kind of stuff regarding business. And speaking of that, you are going to be teaching in the academy. You're going to be teaching about blueprints and mandates and how to implement them. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Can you give a cliffhanger of what that's going to be?
So just a real quick one. Blueprints are a big master plan with all the, pipes and electrical and all the ins and outs of everything. Mandates are your day-to-day or seasonal activities. And scrolls are oftentimes what is like the divine destiny of the matter. And once you engage those, they typically start manifesting in your life. You look at scrolls and where they show up, things start happening when you have scrolls. So cool indicators that God's about ready to do something.
Right on. Thank you so much, Jeff. And you've got so much practical application of understanding how to pull it down out of heaven and make it manifest in your work and in your business. So I absolutely love that. And I honor you for spending all of that time and for being willing to be yielded and having that intimacy with Father. I honor you for that, because all of us can learn from you. So thank you. That we don't take that for granted.
That word honor is, and then we're on a little bit of a rabbit trail. Honor is a big thing in the kingdom, and it's sorely missed in the body of Christ. And we constantly try to usurp everyone. And I see it even in the mystic world, usurping. And honestly, if you was to say the maturity level of someone who says they're mystical or they're mature in the spirit or they can see, or you go, oh, these are supernatural people. Do they usurp? If they don't honor who's in front of them, or they don't honor other people for even in the position of maybe their weakness, then they're truly not mature, because that's a fruit that gets born out of real honest maturity, which comes from, here's our identity. God is love. So what does love look like? Does love usurp? No. So if that fruit of spending time with the Father is in me, that is that thing will be dead. Usurping is like a fear mechanism where I got to be better than you. And that comes from the demonic, Satan's first sin was to usurp the throne. And so it's a huge issue in the body when we talk about identity, is constantly trying to be better. And it's a really big thing for the Father. He does not like it. And I think that's where the idolatry starts in men's life, is trying to constantly be better than someone else, or making myself look better than someone else, or appearing to look better than someone else on social media and these things.
Right.
It's a real big identity issue.
Right.
I was going to be vulnerable with you, and I know you probably want to make a point on that, so go ahead.
No. I was truly, I just really respect the fact that you have been spending the time and done the work to be yielded so that you can teach us. And I was just honoring that. But I want to just point out that if anyone wants the rest of the conversation on the identity, make sure you see part 1, what he was just alluding to.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I get these little fire streaks. I got to go down them. But I wanted to be vulnerable back to this covenant thing.
Yeah.
In learning about covenant, there was an opportunity that I saw in the market to do something that I'm really good at. And there's a lot of work in this area of the market. And I could go and I could have my fill of work. And it's something that I've done the last 4 or 5 years. I won't say what it is, but I've been thinking, I need to go do that. I need to go do that. And my soul wants to go. But my spirit man's like, no, the Father said, wait. And I'm using up resources. And I'm waiting for the next thing. I'm trusting in my relationship through covenant that what I believe I heard is going to manifest, but I've still got to wait, even though this gigantic opportunity in the market has opened up and everybody's running to it, and I could go in there and do fantastic. And this is what the Father has said. He says, you look at the world and you see that opportunity, and you know you're qualified, you're skilled, you're talented, and you could go glean that fruit right now. And the Lord says, but I am the God of the world, in the sense that I made all this. You're in covenant with me. And the moment I want to dump an opportunity on you, it's going to get dumped. You're going to have more than you know what to do with. When I want it on you, when I want it on you, when you're ready, it's going to happen. So you're in covenant with me, who dictates that small little market thing that you see is so big, and it's huge. I'm over the whole world, buddy. And it just gives you perspective of who our Father really is and what covenant we really can have with him, and that we do have with him. When we understand our position in that, which is the identity piece, when we understand we're in covenant with that, what worry do you have? And I know it's easy to say this, right? But it's having confidence and knowing him, that I can trust in that unwritten thing with no guarantees, because I know him. Now, Paul says, I would consider all my knowledge as dung. That's elephant stuff, but to know him. And if you look at know and knew in Scripture, and you go back to the original context of it, and you break it down in the Hebrew, knew, it says, when Abraham knew his wife Sarah, that is an intimate encounter. So Jesus talks about knowing him, supping him, and these things. These is where the crux of covenant identity all comes from, is knowing him. And Jesus even said, he goes, we've heard this many times, depart from me, you workers of iniquity, for I never knew you. What is iniquity? These are people doing good things, casting out devils and speaking and prophesying in his name. As business owners, we run around doing a lot of good stuff. But what we need to do is engage in our covenant and know him and know our position in that covenant, so that then we can act on it and let the greater king bless the lesser king, because he loves us, right? And so now I no longer have to jockey. I no longer have to position, unless he's telling me position yourself in the market, position yourself this way. I will tell you, the last 10 months, what we've done, we set up a corporation, we set up a business trust, and we established some credit. We established lines of credit, and now our company is squeaky clean, has beautiful credit, and we're getting ready to go look for lines of credit with banks to go then do the larger thing that we see to do and getting $1 million contracts with $500,000 bonds, because we structured it out of hearing the voice of God through covenant in relationship with him to go act on that thing on a day-to-day basis. And that, in our last bit here, where we're going to teach people, is what we're going to talk about. How do we implement mandates, blueprints, and scrolls?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Jeff, this has been really, really good. Thank you so much. This is
you
good.
tickle me.
Right on. Oh my goodness, you guys. Oh, so good. Thank you so much, Jeff. And thank you to the audience. Thank you for your support. And again, if you're not part of the Academy, you can go to spiritcenteredbusiness.com and click on the Academy button. If you want to connect with Jeff, it's Covenant Management Services, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you can check him out over there. And I would just invite you to like, subscribe, share with your friends. I appreciate you guys engaging when we go live. We go live on Thursday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific on Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube. You know where to find me, and you can always get the full show notes and everything on spiritcenteredbusiness.com on the podcast, or, you know, wherever you're listening on across the plane of podcasts on Spreaker and iHeartRadio and Spotify and Amazon Music and all of the other places where we are. Thank you so much to Kingdom Talks Media and Fringe Radio Network for syndicating us on all of those other platforms. So let's see. Anything else, Jeff, before we sign off for this second segment?
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. My website's a landing page because we're putting together some larger pieces to the website. There's a phone number on there. Feel free to call me. I love the phone. You can email me too at jeff@covenantmanagementservices, that's plural.com, or you can go to our website at covenantmanagementservices.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, you guys. Until next time, stay spirit-centered. Peace out.
Spirit-centered business, spiritual principles, and business principles combined. If you're ready to align your destiny and discover the destiny of your business, join us. We are entrepreneurs, leaders, and business professionals who take the power of the spirit realm in our business seriously. We go beyond just consuming information. We participate, activate, and engage the supernatural with unbelievable results. If you want to gather with like-minded business professionals to activate spiritual principles and mastermind creative solutions to business challenges, Spirit-Centered Business is your tribe. Go to spiritcenteredbusiness.com to become a member today. Thank you for listening to Spirit-Centered Business with Bralynn Newby. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. The next stage of doing business by being spirit-centered is coming together in collaboration, working with spiritual principles, and knowing our destiny. Join our tribe at spiritcenteredbusiness.com, and we'll catch you on the next broadcast. Peace out.